Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Amanda Wilkie. Hi, Amanda. Thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Hey, Jon, always a pleasure.
Amanda is one of our technology and process consultants, among other things. And, Amanda, as you work with firms, no matter kind of what the topic, whether it's in the technology area and the process area, accountability and performance, accountability and results are always infused in the conversation. And I think over the last few years, especially, we have seen new roles come up in firms to help increase that accountability and performance. So I guess my first question for you is, what areas of performance or areas of accountability are firms looking to kind of increase, get a better handle on? And then how has that resulted in the types of roles you're seeing develop?
Yeah. Well, Jon, and I know you've had a lot of these conversations recently as well, but firms are really focusing on that client experience and the staff experience as well. You know, firms are struggling to find CPAs. CPAs are leaving the public accounting profession. They're going into private industry. They're leaving accounting altogether. So I think one of the drivers behind some of these new roles that are focused on accountability, it's also focused on that client experience and that staff experience, so that they can improve those things. And part of that is accountability and holding people accountable to what needs to be done for that client experience or that staff experience. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I feel like, and at least the conversations I've been a part of, and this may be a little different, maybe from your perspective or others, is like all of a sudden, I'll say, I'm doing air quotes, all of a sudden for our listeners, I can't see our video, that every firm was talking about client experience. And you can really define a great client experience and then have your staff or employees look at that client experience and say, well, I see from the client's perspective, that would be really great. But does that mean I have to do all these different functions within the firm in order to deliver that client experience? Because my experience, I would prefer to focus on, this area versus another area, right? And so real quickly behind that became staff experience. And now I feel like they're running dual in a lot of firms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're seeing as well, Jon, when we talk to firms about process and when we talk to firms about technology. It's like, great, we want to improve the client experience. And just as you're saying, the staff is like, that's wonderful. I don't have the time to take on this additional communication or the additional tasks that you want us to do to actually improve that client experience. So I think that is the catalyst, and we're starting to see a few things change.
Yeah. So as firms work through that, what are some of the roles, the functions, but the new roles you see firms either creating and moving current staff into, or maybe they're creating that role and hiring brand new? But I guess my main question is, what are some of the new roles you see being created in firms?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I will tell you personally, Jon, when I worked in accounting firms, when I looked at my educational background, when I looked at my professional background, when I looked at my resume, there was nothing more demoralizing than the firm referring to the CPAs as the professional staff. Like the rest of us were non-professionals. You've got a lot of great administrative professionals that add a lot of value to the firm and a lot of value to the client. And that is a shift that we're starting to see, or a focus that we're starting to see, is when firms look at their process and the tasks in them, they're asking themselves, does this particular part of our process, does this task, does this, whatever we're doing to improve that client experience, does it require a CPA designation? And if it doesn't require a CPA designation, can we move it off to an administrative professional? So we're seeing a lot of these administrative professional roles start to be developed within firms, and there are a few of them. I'm very, very passionate about process improvement. Anyone who listens to our podcast on a regular basis knows that I'm very passionate about process improvement. Um, so we're starting to see firms really focus on the process so that they can increase that client experience, they can increase that staff experience. And we're starting to see roles like a process manager um, start to be developed and really find that home in operations. That way, it's not, tax is driving process improvement engagements for tax, and audit is driving it for audit, and every service line is driving it for themselves because they really do need to be focused on that client experience. So you're starting to see again those roles, those administrative professional roles that are being developed to own process improvement so they can support that person or that team can support those service lines in their initiatives for process improvement. Another role that we're starting to see, John, is the role of a project manager or an engagement manager. Every firm, a lot of firms call them, different things. It can be a project manager, it can be an engagement manager. I know one firm that's calling it a client relationship manager, so a CRM. And in that role, that person is really in charge of managing the engagement and making sure that the team is hitting those milestones, making sure that the client has that great experience. They are a point of contact for the client to reach out to with questions and to communicate. It also gives that person the opportunity to build a really good relationship with that client, hence client relationship manager. And that gives you the opportunity, that gives that person the opportunity to help identify additional ways that the firm can really support this client and provide additional services to the client. The third role that I would mention that we're seeing, John, is more of a true classic project manager. Again, this is more of an administrative professional that can support the service lines by providing that organization and communication around projects so that when your service line leaders or your service line teams start getting busy with that excellent client service and client experience that they're creating, sometimes the projects and the initiatives that they're working on can kind of fall by the wayside. That administrative professional that is in the role of a project manager can really keep those projects moving forward by holding other people accountable. Again, it goes back to the communication, the organization, and the accountability that they can bring to the team.
Yeah, and it sounds like in general, based off those roles that were firms are kind of no longer trying to get a few individuals to serve a ton of different functions, right? I can think about the stress related to, right? Well, I need to do the work. I need a great client experience. I need to manage all these projects. I need to improve the processes of all these areas. And instead of trying to get a few individuals, one person to say, hey, you're responsible for all these things, as firms are saying, hey, demand are so high for our services, and we need we need professionals in each of these functional areas so everyone can be spending time on their best and highest use.
Yep.
And one role I would just throw in there that I'm seeing firms create too, that I think falls right in line with what you're talking about, Amanda, is I know one firm that calls this role a value strategist. It can be called many different things, but it's essentially someone that's working with prospective clients or even with current clients, talking about additional services. So more of that sales related type role, right? So if you think about, asking someone, hey, you need to develop business, sell business, you need to manage that business, you need to do that business, you need to improve the overall process of that business. That just, people just crumble under that. So I love what you were seeing as you work with firms of seeing these new roles being created
Yep.
to be able to do
And
all that work.
And John, think about the client experience and the staff experience. If you take that role of like the client relationship manager who has built that relationship, who can help identify some of the opportunities for the firm to provide additional services, you pair them up with that value strategist. These are two people that don't have to be CPAs, don't necessarily have to be, billable either. They can really invest in making sure that the needs of the client are identified and that that client starts getting exceptional service from the very beginning before the sales process even starts. And think about the load that actually takes off of your client service professionals, the people who are actually delivering the work.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to talk about the client benefits, which are definitely there, and you just highlighted. It's another thing to also talk about the staff benefits. I know every firm out there is trying to retain their staff, especially what they call their best and brightest, or the ones that really are really high performers. And I think what you're describing, these types of roles, is your best performers in your firm want to work on teams like this. They want to have these types of
Hmm.
roles within the firm. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I, as a client service professional, I want to focus on actually delivering those services. That's what I'm good at. That's what my expertise is in. And then all of these other administrative client experience tasks can be taken care of by the rest of the team as well.
yeah. So as you work with firms in this area and you see these new roles being created, where do they typically start? Right?
Where
Where do they start?
where the firms start?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important to identify what value you would like this role to add to the clients, to the staff as well. So look at what your client service professionals are doing. Look at some of the tasks and again, ask, is a CPA designation required for this, or can we offload it and put it somewhere else? So you kind of have to have a vision for this role and what they're going to add. And then what are some of those tasks that will be part of their daily duties? I would also encourage firms to think about what is the long-term growth opportunities for these roles within the organization. Because what you don't want to do is identify people, hire these people, and then they just stagnate because you haven't really created that ladder for them to climb. So again, I would say have a vision for the role, identify the value that they will bring, and then make sure that you also have a long-term strategy for the growth in these roles as well.
That's great. That's great advice to get started and kind of that next step firms and leaders in firms should take in that area. Amanda, if someone wanted to reach out to you and just have more conversations with you about this, because you can probably fast track their success and help them avoid some pain points, maybe even connect them with other people or, other resources. What are the best ways they can reach out to you?
So they can always email me. John, I hope that you will put my email address in the notes of this podcast, but amanda.wilkie@boomer.com. They can also reach out to me on social media. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on Twitter at Amanda Wilkie BCI. And then, of course, they can always go to boomer.com, and there are links to fill out contact forms as well. So there are many, many ways to get in touch with me, John.
Absolutely. All right. Well, as always, Amanda, thank you for being on this episode of the podcast. And for our listeners, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. So if you haven't had a chance to subscribe, please go ahead and do that. We really focus on 5 key areas to your firm's success. That's leadership, talent, technology, process, and growth. And we like to change up the topics weekly, but the common theme among all those topics is that they are critical to your firm's success. So please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, John.